Jury selection will begin next month. SeaWorld executives misled them.
Accusations tonight that SeaWorld is abusing dolphins, whales, and other animals, and PETA says it has the images to prove it.
I'm here to free the orcas, put them in sanctuaries, give them a better life. They deserve better than living in a bathtub all their life.
If someone told you there's an orca who has spent over 5 decades in captivity, outliving most of her kind, you'd think it's a tale of triumph. But for Corky, the oldest captive orca, it's a story of heartbreak. Captured in 1969 at just 4 years old, Corky's life has been one of stark contrasts. Born in the wild, she swam through the pristine waters off British Columbia, guided by the calls of her family. Today she circles a concrete tank, her cries echoing off sterile walls. Corky's journey isn't just hers. It's a mirror to humanity's relationship with nature, a story of mistakes made and questions unanswered. Can we undo decades of damage? And more importantly, will we act before it's too late? The waters of Vancouver Island were a sanctuary of life. Pods of orcas moved with practiced grace, their haunting songs weaving a tapestry of family, tradition, and survival. Corky was born into this world, a curious calf, shadowing her mother's every move, learning the rhythms of the ocean. But in the late 1960s, this sanctuary became a hunting ground. The booming marine park industry turned orcas into prized attractions. Hunters patrolled the waters with speedboats, nets in tow, ready to capture the blackfish that fascinated human audiences. On December 11, 1969, the A5 pod's world shattered. Corky, just a calf, was torn from her family in a frenzy of roaring engines and panicked cries. Her mother, Stripe, called out desperately, a sound Corky would never forget. Shipped to marine land of the Pacific, Corky entered a world far removed from the boundless waters she once knew. Concrete tanks replaced the ocean, and crowds replaced the familiar clicks and whistles of her pod. For Corky, captivity was a new reality, but it came at a cost. The bonds she once relied on were gone, leaving only the echoes of a life stolen. Imagine the shock of a young orca, plucked from the vastness of the ocean and confined to a small, sterile tank. The water was still and the walls unyielding. Corky's new life was designed for spectacle. She became a star, performing tricks for cheering crowds, her sleek body gliding through hoops and splashing delighted onlookers. But behind the scenes, her existence was marked by solitude and loss. For Corky, every moment was a reminder of what she had lost. Her new reality was one of performance. She learned tricks, entertained crowds, and became a star attraction. At Marineland, Corky was paired with Orca II, another captive orca from her pod. Together they performed tirelessly. In 1977, Corky became the first orca to give birth in captivity. For a moment, it seemed her life might regain some semblance of normalcy, a calf to call her own. But captivity is an unnatural world. Her calf, unable to nurse properly, died just 11 days later. This pattern repeated 6 more times. Each birth brought hope, and each loss deepened the void. Corky grieved silently, her mourning unnoticed by the crowds that came to see her perform. In 1987, Corky was sold to SeaWorld San Diego. There, her life intersected with tragedy once more. A clash with the dominant female, Candu Fev, ended in Candu's accidental death. Orchid, Candu's young daughter, was left motherless. Corky, ever resilient, stepped in as a surrogate, a bittersweet reminder of the calves she had lost. But beneath the glossy performances and applause lay a darker truth. Captivity was a life of slow erosion for a creature like Corky. Orcas are built for the boundless sea. In the wild, they travel up to 140 miles a day, their sleek bodies cutting through water at speeds of 34 miles per hour. Corky, confined to a tank, could only swim endless circles, her powerful tail reduced to stirring the same stale water. Her dorsal fin, a proud, towering feature in the wild, drooped to the side, a visual scar shared by most captive orcas. Scientists suggest this happens because tanks are too shallow to support the orca's natural behavior, and the stagnant lifestyle further compounds the problem. It's a symbol of everything captivity takes from them: strength, freedom, identity. Orcas don't just survive in the wild, they thrive in complex social worlds. Corky's original pod, the A5S, was no different. They had their own dialect, a set of unique calls passed down through generations. Corky, torn from her family at just 4 years old, was plunged into a tank with other orcas who spoke a different language. Imagine being dropped into a foreign land, surrounded by strangers, unable to communicate. That's what captivity did to Corky. It silenced her voice and severed her connection to the culture of her pod. But it wasn't just Corky who suffered. Orcas in the wild have a life expectancy rivaling humans. Females can live up to 90 years. Yet in captivity, orcas often don't make it past their teens. Corky's calves were born into this grim statistic. Over 7 pregnancies, not a single calf survived. One lived just 46 days, others died within weeks. Each loss added another weight to Corky's burden, her calls echoing unanswered in the sterile waters of her tank. And yet, Corky endured. Orcas are emotional powerhouses, their brains boasting a limbic system more advanced than ours. This means they don't just feel, they feel deeply. Scientists believe they form lifelong bonds, grieve for lost companions, and even pass down traditions across generations. So when Corky's companion, Orca II, died in 1988, it wasn't just the loss of a tank mate, it was the loss of a connection to the only other orca who had shared her pain of capture. Her life in captivity was a stark contrast to the life she was built for. In the wild, orcas have been observed using sophisticated hunting techniques, even teaching their young to use tools. They've been seen coordinating attacks, sliding onto beaches to snatch seals, or creating waves to knock prey into the water. These behaviors are learned, not instinctive, a testament to their intelligence and adaptability. And intelligence was something Corky didn't leave behind in the wild. She learned the routines of her trainers, the rhythms of the shows, and the expectations of her audience. But what she couldn't learn was how to reconcile the walls around her with the endless expanse she was meant to roam. For Corky, captivity was not just a physical confinement, it was a slow unraveling of her spirit. Every day in the tank was another step away from the open ocean, another layer of her wild identity stripped away. And yet the spark of who she once was remained, flickering faintly, waiting for the chance to be reignited. By now, Corky had become a symbol of captivity's toll. People rallied around her story, calling for her release. They envisioned a sanctuary, a 40-acre stretch of ocean where Corky could feel the currents again and perhaps hear the distant calls of her family, but SeaWorld pushed back. They claimed Corky was too old, too dependent on humans, and that a transition could be dangerous. As the years passed, hope dimmed, but the fight for Corky's freedom raged on. The world outside the park was changing. For Corky, each passing year in captivity dimmed the hope of ever knowing freedom again. For her advocates, the fight was bigger than one whale. It was a challenge to a system that prioritized profit over compassion. Would Corky's spirit, battered but unbroken, survive a transition back to the ocean? And would humanity act in time to rewrite her story? Corky's existence in captivity is a paradox. She survived where so many others didn't, yet every day in her tank is a reminder of the life she lost. Her dorsal fin droops, a physical emblem of captivity's toll, and yet her story is far from over. Today, Corky's story stands as both a triumph of resilience and a testament to captivity's cost. She has outlived her peers, surviving over 50 years in tanks, but her survival is bittersweet, a life spent far from the family and waters she once knew. Her story has sparked change. Public outcry led SeaWorld to end its orca breeding program and phase out theatrical shows. Yet these changes came too late for Corky, whose world remains confined by concrete walls. Corky's legacy extends beyond SeaWorld. Her life has inspired the fight for ethical treatment of marine animals and the creation of seaside sanctuaries. But the question remains, will Corky ever experience freedom? Or will her story remain a symbol of what was lost? The answer lies in our hands.